Midsize three-row SUVs provide lots of utility at a reasonable price, usually between $30,000 and $50,000 if you don't go nuts with options. They're perfect for a growing family and a stylish alternative to the minivan, which doesn't offer all-wheel drive in most cases. You can expect lots of advanced safety features along with capable acceleration.
The Kia Telluride is our #1 ranked midsize three-row SUV, recently beating out our previous favorite, the Honda Pilot.
Now we have the new Hyundai Palisade and the all-new Ford Explorer. We wanted to include a Honda Pilot in this comparison test, but Honda declined.
We put these SUVs through our rigorous and standardized testing and evaluation process to find out which of these three you should have at the top of your shopping list.
But before we get started, remember to visit Edmunds.com next time you're ready to research a new car, truck, or SUV. And for more videos like this one, click subscribe.
One of the most important aspects of any midsize three-row SUV worth its sheet metal is interior space, and we've crawled through all three of these cabins pretty extensively. What did you guys think?
I thought when we're talking about the front rows in these things, any size driver is going to be able to sit in them. There's plenty of leg room, headroom, shoulder room. That's not the issue. It's when you get into the second row, that's when things...
Yeah, there are definitely some differences back there. All of them have slide and recline middle row seats. It's interesting that the Ford comes standard in most cases with captain's chairs and a bench is optional, whereas on the Hyundai Kia it's the other way around. But with a seat all the way back, you know, I'm 6'2", so I notice it more. There's just kind of like a little less legroom in the Explorer. I felt like my knees are a little closer to the front seat back, and I can sit behind myself technically if I set the driver's seat to my liking, but in the other two, I just have lots of room, and the seats have better cushioning too.
It's probably a good time to mention car seats. So I tried installing car seats in all three of the cars. As far as the seat anchors, I found that the Ford had anchors that are slightly more visible, which made it easier to find and click in. Whereas with the Telluride and the Palisade, the anchors were a bit more recessed. But when it came to installing the seat base, all three were relatively easy. But having a larger rear-facing car seat, I found that there was significantly more space in the Telluride and Palisade than there was in the Explorer.
Right.
I could barely fit a hand in between the driver's seat and the car seat when it's adjusted for myself. I'm about 5'9", so it wasn't an issue, but I think drivers that are 6 foot and taller might have an issue with that.
Speaking of size issues, these are three-row SUVs, but they're not, that extra row is not really meant for someone like you, but it's...
Not really.
It was still kind of eye-opening to get in the back of these. I'm about 6 feet tall, so I'm kind of like at the limit as to what you can reasonably expect a vehicle this size to accommodate. But here we also saw two of the vehicles have enough room for people like me.
Third row seats are usually meant for children, but I feel like the Telluride and the Palisade did an exceptionally good job in making it actually pretty comfortable for adults. Now, in terms of access to the third row, again, the Telluride and Palisade have similar ways of getting back there. There's a release button that you press, and they actually have two. There's one on the shoulder and one on the bottom, which makes it easier for kids to access. And when you push that button, the seat slides forward and you can just climb in.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about the Ford is if somebody wanted to get in the third row, but it was folded down flat, that you couldn't do it from the door. You'd have to go around to the hatch and open the hatch and use the buttons there to power the third row up and then go around and get in.
With the Kia having manual fold seats and the Palisade having power fold seats, it didn't matter. You could put the third row seat up from either the rear passenger door or the trunk.
Now, once we actually sat in those back seats, it was also more comfortable, I felt, in the Hyundai and the Kia. There was just that much more room, not only for our bodies, but it was a better place to sit. Like the Hyundai and the Kia both had a cup holder, they had USB power jacks back there, and the Ford on the left-hand side had an armrest, but your side...
That's right, it was really strange. Ford having some sort of asymmetrical arrangement. I went to go put my arm on the armrest and found it sitting in a bin. instead, which was very uncomfortable.
Speaking of bins, that kind of leads us back up to the front row, and each of these vehicles has a different way of handling small items, storage.
Yeah, the last car I was in was the Explorer, and I really like the way they've used the space there. You know, it's got a rotary shifter. I think all three of these handle the shifter differently, and the Ford's is a nice rotary knob that's really easy to figure out, but what it means is it doesn't take up much space. So there's room for a nice big bin in front of it that you can close, and that's where the USB port is. There's a couple of cup holders alongside the shifter and a little slot where you can stand up your phone, so you can still use the cup holders. You don't have to put your phone in a cup holder, which is nice. Yeah, and there's a little place where you can lean a phone up against a wireless charging pad right behind that. And then there's the center console, which isn't too huge, but since you got the one in the front, that's not bad. And then the door pockets are big, and the glove box is big, and even the rear seat has big door pockets. The center console in the Ford Explorer is non-existent. It's more of a tray on the floor.
Yeah.
They say that's so you can hop into the back row between the captain's chairs. Okay, but it is just a tray on the floor. But still, it's a pretty good setup.
I found that the Palisade also made good use of that storage space up front. It also has a shift-by-wire gear selector up front, so you don't have this mechanical mechanism taking up a lot of space.
Push buttons, though.
Push buttons, yeah, I know. I mean, we can argue that point. I think some people might like it, some people not. But I think the fact is it saves space up front.
Yeah.
As big as that space is, I think within a month or two, that's going to turn into like a junk drawer in somebody's house. I think you're going to throw hair clips in there, like cell phone cables, sunglasses, car keys are going to get lost because it's got the little charging pad slot that actually disappears underneath the shifter. And I did run into a time when I couldn't find my car keys, and they'd actually slid inside there, and I had to go fishing around for it. But I think normal life is just gonna like pile a bunch of stuff inside that bin. Yeah, the Kia does have a more old school shifter. I kind of like that better.
Yeah, me too.
It has less space, I think less actual volume, but I think the Kia uses it better. I think you've got cup holders that hold cups well. You've got a place to put your phone. You've got not as much space, but I think it just utilizes the space that it has better. And if you open up the center console bin, you can put a roll of paper towels in there vertically. I don't know why you would ever want to do that. But
You did it.
But
Yeah.
you know that you can, which
Yes,
which
yeah.
is kind of cool.
Exactly.
I know it doesn't have quite as much space as the other two, but I didn't find myself wanting for extra space. So even though it didn't have as much space, like you said, I think it makes good use of the space that it does have. And I also think it looks kind of the nicest out of the
for
three.
sure.
I think as long as we're still sitting in the front seats of these vehicles, we could talk about climate control because each of these SUVs kind of handles it in their own way. The Kia's got 3 vents across the center, tons of airflow. I was always comfortable. The Hyundai Palisade has 2, and the Explorer also has 2.
Yeah, but the Explorer is a little different because, you know, they've got that screen in the middle and the vents are off to the side, and so there doesn't really have the airflow down the middle of the car. It's like right on your hand. You know, so I didn't really like that so much. But the other thing that was almost a little more annoying was I just never could quite be comfortable without always futzing with the temperature. You know, it's not really very good at just picking a temperature and setting it and forgetting it.
One thing that I did like about the Explorer was how effective the seat ventilation and heaters were.
Yeah.
I mean, noticeably better than both the Kia and the Hyundai. I think that's maybe enough to sort of compensate for its lack of climate climate control.
But you know, this is great to talk about an SUV's interior, but you know, they're about carrying cargo and doing some work, so we should talk about utility. You know, all 3 of these, you know, when you have the rear seats folded down and the middle rows in use, they all have about the same amount of space.
Yeah.
But things start to get different when you put up the 3rd row to put people in it.
Yeah, we actually tried loading all 3 of these with carry-on luggage. And what we found is that we could fit 5 regulation size carry-on luggages in the back of both the Telluride and the Palisade and just hit the hatch button and have the hatch close all by itself.
5's good. You could go
Yeah.
pick somebody up from the airport and have the kids along.
Right. When it came to the Explorer, and we did the same sort of method with having the automatic hatch close on its own, we could only fit 3.
Oh.
Now, we were able to fit 4 kind of laying down and squishing it a little bit.
Right.
But depends on how much you care about your luggage. If you're cool with that, then four will fit in the back of the Explorer.
All three of these also have their own way of folding that third row. The Hyundai Palisade and the Ford Explorer, they're power. The Kia, they're manual. I actually prefer manual folding seats. It's quick and easy. I'm also tall enough and my arms are long enough where I can just reach in, grab the strap, and the seat folds flat. But something to keep in mind is that if the weather isn't that great outside, if you don't live in sunny Southern California, to reach in and grab that handle to raise the seats, you're going to lean over a muddy bumper or a wet bumper or a bumper covered in snow, and your clothes are going to get ruined.
Right, and if you're not very tall, you might have a little bit more trouble reaching in and pulling the strap up.
Yeah, agreed.
I also liked the speed and ease of which those Kia seats folded. But I will have to say, I was holding my baby girl and trying to put the seat down, and you actually need to use two hands to both raise and lower that seat. So when you grab the strap, you need to pull it back and hold it in place when you
release you just
it.
dropped your child.
Exactly. Having the power release, other than the convenience of it, still serves some use in real world situations.
The other thing is getting into the hatch of all these vehicles. They all have a cool hands-free way to open the hatch.
That's right.
But they're not quite the same.
With the Ford, you have to do this kicking motion, and I think you tried it a few times. How did you find that?
Well, you have to stand on one foot and swipe your other foot underneath it, and there's a certain spot it wants you to be at. If you don't get it right, you look kind of silly. But getting to your point earlier about ice and snow, if this was winter and it was icy, standing there on one foot trying to get the door to behave, I don't know, that doesn't
While
feel...
holding shopping bags
or your
full of
child.
stuff. Or your child, like trying to do that, it's kind of awkward. Whereas with the Kia and the Hyundai, they have this smart tailgate where you just have to stand in back of the tailgate. It beeps to let you know that something's happening, and then the tailgate just opens, which I think is a brilliant solution.
Yeah, when I first walked up and tried that on the Hyundai Palisade, I swiped my foot and the rear hatch opened, and I only later found out that no, it can sense where the key is, and then it beeps, and then it opens it. So you can just walk up, like you guys both said, you can walk up with your arms full and just wait.
Right.
You might look a little weird, and people might look at you and think that you've lost your keys, but you just wait, and that's it.
But it's also not a perfect solution because there were times where I was standing in my driveway talking to my neighbor, and I'm behind the Telluride, and it all of a sudden starts beeping, and you're just like, oh, whoa, I don't want it to open.
I guess if you stood back there and then started talking, got interrupted by a dog walker coming by.
Yeah. But it's also nice to know that you can turn that feature off if you don't like it.
Yeah.
So other than hauling things inside, SUVs are generally more capable at towing things than other types of vehicles. But since I don't have any real experience in this, maybe our resident tow expert can shed some light.
Sure. And there's some big differences here because the Ford, in its two-wheel drive form, is rear drive. It was front drive in the last generation, but they've changed back to rear drive. The Hyundai and Kia are both front drive machines at heart. So really that's an advantage for Ford because you want your tongue weight to be pressing down on the drive wheels. And you get that with a Ford. And that's part of the reason why it can tow a little bit more. Its maximum tow rating is about 5,600 pounds. And they have 4 engines, and even the hybrid can tow 5,000. The thing about the Ford that is also good is the hitch. It's right there where you can see it. The connector for the 4 and 7-pin wiring is right there. 7-pin wiring means it'll support electric trailer brakes. You have to add your own trailer brake controller, but that's a plug-and-play operation using a pigtail that comes in the glove box. So kudos to Ford for that. But the Hyundai and Kia, they're no slouch either. They can tow 5,000 pounds. And what's good about them is you can get load-leveling rear shocks with those. In the case of the Telluride, it comes when you get the hitch. In the case of the Palisade, it's something that comes when you get the 20-inch wheels. So it works even if you're not towing, if you got 3 rows of people in there. And 5,000 pounds is a nice solid number. And the one thing that the Ford has over both of them, it's got a tow haul mode, and that changes the shift points and just makes it a nicer drive when you're towing a trailer.
So that rear drive platform has more benefits than just being able to do power slides in an SUV.
Yeah, I think so.
Donuts.
But that's a good one.
Speaking of power slides, let's talk about performance.
Ah,
Yeah.
performance.
Finally.
So that Ford is f***ing fast. All right, that Ford is really fast, and we actually had two of the available four engines come in. We had Platinum with a 3-liter twin-turbo V6, and we had a Limited with a 2.3-liter turbocharged four-cylinder, and they were both quicker than the Kia and Hyundai.
The four-cylinder, the 2.3-liter Ford, got to 60 miles an hour in 7 seconds, and the V6, the 3-liter V6, did it in 5.8 seconds. So as you say, that's fairly fast.
Just what you want out of a 3-row SUV.
I don't think anything else in the segment even comes close to that 3-liter. I mean, that's they've put their stamp on that.
Yeah.
And that's not the only thing that Ford does well. It actually handles quite surprisingly well.
Yeah.
I think you said it at the track where this is more like a tall wagon than a midsize 3-row SUV. But that said, the Hyundai and Kia aren't slouches in a straight line. I think 7.5 seconds to 60,
they're right
which
there.
is
They're
right
not slow
there.
at all.
Considering these things are primarily people movers, I think we could call those both adequate.
Oh, sure.
Now, in terms of handling, I felt like the Telluride and Palisade also weren't bad. They're not going to feel like a vehicle that you can go out and you'd want to attack a back road in. But at the same time, they handled themselves pretty well.
The Ford Explorer would be a little bit more enjoyable to drive. It's just really nice on winding road. Steering loads up nice in corners, and it just has nice balance and composure.
So, performance is kind of a fun thing to talk about, but it's not all about performance, especially with these types of vehicles.
Right.
So drivability, I think with the Ford and its new 10-speed automatic transmission, I found that it wasn't quite as smooth as I would have wanted it to be if I was driving this thing every day. Like the performance, it's got it. It's got it, but it seems like it's tuned a little too aggressively, would you say?
Yeah, it feels really eager. You really feel the boost, not so much the eco. And it really wants to go, and that kind of shows in our MPG results. The Hyundai and the Kia are both rated at 21 miles per gallon combined, and the 2.3-liter Ford is rated at 23, and so it should be two better based on, similar driving. But what we saw is that everything got 21 miles per gallon.
With the Ford, the way that it's tuned, you want to almost dig into that boost, which is going to cost you MPGs.
Yeah.
That eagerness in the Ford where it's always on and it feels like it's always ready also is kind of found in the ride too.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with comfort. So with the Ford, I found that it had good primary ride, but not good secondary ride. And what I mean by that is that it was able to handle kind of the big stuff really well, but some of the finer undulations in the road really came through, and it made the ride feel
A little busy, yeah.
A little busy,
Like it's
right?
Following every little detail of the road surface.
Right, which I didn't feel in the Telluride or the Palisade. Now those suspensions are by no means perfect, but I felt like they absorbed a lot more of that secondary jitteriness better.
Yeah, I think they were a little more consistent, across a wider range of road surfaces.
All of these SUVs can be had with all-wheel drive, and all of our test cars came with all-wheel drive. These systems aren't necessarily geared for any hardcore off-road. It's more inclement weather. But that said, we did spend a little bit of time with these things off-road. And by we, I mean Dan. So Dan, what did you think?
Inclement weather is the main reason for having all-wheel drive here, but they can do a little bit more than that. We had a little off-road course we could take them on. The Hyundai and Kia both have a four-wheel drive lock button, which doesn't necessarily lock the center differential, but it makes sure that the front and rear axle have equal amounts of torque. It's not waiting for slip to engage an axle, it's just making it be engaged all the time. The Ford has something similar, but it's kind of buried into a setting that they call trail, and then there's another one for sand and deep snow. So you have a couple of different settings there. They all have about the same level of articulation. None of them really hiked a wheel any further off the ground than any of the others. But ultimately, if we all took all three of these out someplace, it's not like one of them was going to be holding up the other two.
Pretty equally capable.
Yeah, but it's going to be, dirt roads that,
Right.
not the Rubicon Trail.
Okay, moving on to technology. All these SUVs were equipped with some pretty advanced driving aids, like adaptive cruise control. They had lane keep assist, they had blind spot monitoring, and all worked fairly well. I think pretty even in that field. But I think what grabs people's attention even more today is the infotainment systems and smartphone integration. So what did you guys think about those?
Unsurprisingly, the Hyundai and Kia systems were basically the exact same. The Kia has its own font, shocker. But also both of them were the same size. It was 10.25 inches for both. It's the traditional landscape layout.
It's a widescreen landscape, really nice.
Yeah, but Ford had a better idea.
The one that everybody talks about is the 10.1 inch portrait-oriented screen that's right in the middle. It looks like an iPad sitting there. And we like the portrait-oriented screen in a Ram 1500, but this one is quite a bit narrower. And so when you run Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, the screen is kind of small, the usable part. The bottom half doesn't really have anything going on either. So I like the lower level 8-inch screen, which is landscape oriented, and you get a little tray underneath it, which I like. I mean, I can actually put my phone right in there.
Now, what is that thing about having CarPlay plugged in and using the native nav?
As soon as you plug in your phone, it wants you to use the navigation system through Apple CarPlay, and the native nav winks out. And it's like, no, I need to be in both environments at once. The Ford isn't really very happy doing that, whereas the Hyundai and Kia are just fine.
But I will say this, the benefit of that larger vertical screen in the Ford is that if you're using the native navigation system and you like to run in the direction of travel, you do have a long runway to see what's coming up. You can see a lot of streets.
The one thing we haven't talked about yet, and it's probably the most important thing, is price. So how much do these things cost?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. All of these things have a pretty broad price range, and I think it depends on what you want. And as far as options go, you can buy all three of these vehicles in a base two-wheel drive configuration. That Palisade starts at $32,645, the Telluride at $32,785, and the Explorer XLT starts at $37,870. Now there is a more basic Explorer than the XLT, but that's probably just for fleet sales. But if you can find one of those, that's going to start at $33,860. All the ones we drove were highly optioned all-wheel drive versions. The Palisade Limited stickered at $47,605, the Telluride SX at $46,860, and the Explorer Platinum at, get this, $61,330.
What?
Now, $61K is pretty steep, and most people probably won't pay that much for an Explorer, so we brought in a Limited with a 4-cylinder engine to see if that would help its case. No, that stickered at $53,120.
I mean, that just goes to show you where the Telluride and the Palisade are at. Like, I don't think you could get those things above 50 if you threw everything at it.
No.
Yet they had the same number of features as the Ford, and in some ways felt better built. Like I think the interior quality of both those cabins were really nice. The materials that they used, everything felt solidly screwed together. So I mean, Kia and Hyundai are providing a real value at this price point, and I think they've set a new benchmark for this class in that sense. So with the Ford, I mean, that's a hefty price tag. So what are we getting?
Where the money is in the Ford, I think, is in the rear drive layout. They got some really cool forged aluminum control arms underneath there. There's the 10-speed automatic, 4 engines with turbochargers. So there's a lot of money in the engineering, but it's not the kind of thing that you're going to see each and every day. It does lead to, sharper handling and a couple of other things, but as far as just commuting to the store or whatever, you're not going to necessarily see it. So it's kind of like a case of you don't quite get what you pay for.
So we've talked about a lot of stuff. We've tallied up all the scores, and one of these vehicles comes out in first place, but that means that one of these vehicles comes out in last place.
This is the best Explorer that Ford has ever built. And I think it could be an attractive option if you're going to be doing a lot of towing. And if you live up in the mountains, you're going to be driving a lot of mountain roads. But the fact of the matter is, the benchmark has been moved, and the Kia and Hyundai are really, really good SUVs.
Both of those vehicles don't really have any flaws. They do everything that they're supposed to do. They're smooth, they're quiet, they're comfortable, they carry people. also in a lot of comfort that can still tow. My preference, though, would lean toward the Kia. I think it has a richer interior, and I think it fits in with the brand. I know that styling is very subjective, and it always will be, but the Kia is instantly recognizable as a Kia, and I think the Palisade doesn't seem to fit in with other Hyundais.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I like the Telluride because it's got its own personality. People stop me at gas stations and they wondered what it was. You know, one of them thought it was a Land Rover, and I don't see that exactly, but I do see that it looks really unique.
So it sounds like we decided Explorer, Palisade, Telluride. So the Telluride remains our top pick in the segment against some pretty formidable competition. It received an impressive score of 8.4 out of 10 overall, which is to say we really like this thing.
Yeah.
But let us know what you think down in the comments. Be sure to hit subscribe if you want to see more great content just like this, and see you next time.